Hello and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Bill Froehlich, and this is our weekly roundup of some of the stories that have been making headlines here in northern Michigan. And with me at the table are three of the folks from the White Pine Press at Northwestern Michigan College. And to my right, we've got staff advisor Jakob Wheeler. Jakob, good to have you back.
Thanks, Bill.
Good to see you. And to my left, immediately to my left, staff writer and production manager Breanne Russell and editor-in-chief Laureen Horan. Ladies, thank you for coming in too.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, good to see you all. Jakob, I know also people who watch this show will know you from Betsy Current and Glen Arbor Sun. We're in off-season hiatus right now, so today we're going to focus all on the White Pine Press, and really this issue from this past week is all about the Flint water crisis. And we really want to touch on that, and I guess start with you, Jakob, in terms of the why and the field trip, more or less, that you guys took down to Flint. Talk to me about that discussion as an advisor.
So we've gone twice to Flint now. We've taken students from the White Pine Press and from my journalism class at the college. We went in late January, as soon as kind of Flint blew up and became an international story. With all the political implications and whatnot. And we went back the first weekend in March, I guess, to coincide with the Democratic debate, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. We thought it'd be a pretty interesting time to be there when the political rodeo rolled into town, the security apparatus, and all this political attention, and thus national and international attention on Flint, because Clinton and Sanders have been talking about the Flint water crisis for a long time. So we were at the debate. But we also, as we did on the first trip, met with a lot of Flint residents who have been affected by this terrible crisis. I mean, as with most stories, the real story is not in the debate room or the spin room or the politicians, whatever. The real story is in people's homes or people's churches. In our two trips, we spent some time at a couple African-American Baptist churches, which have become rallying points for water distribution and helping people cope with what's going on in Flint. We visited homes, homes of white, African-American, Latino families. We visited union halls. We've taken part in or followed water distribution drives where several semi-trucks go to one neighborhood and distribute water for hours and hours to a few city blocks, which is empowering and powerful to see and powerful to write about and take photos of, but then you realize this is going to get them through the next few days. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the biggest Band-Aid in the world. So it's a tough story to cover. It's powerful. It's very important, I think. I think it's important for the reading audience up here to consider Flint all but a local story. It's also great on-the-ground training for student journalists because it's right here in our backyard, and it's an opportunity for reporting and to tell really powerful human stories.
Well, ladies, let me turn over to you, and Laureen, as editor, I'll start with you. What first reaction when Jakob said, "Hey, we're going to Flint"?
I was really happy about it. I wasn't able to go on either of the trips just because I work so much, but I was really excited that he was going to be able to go along with other White Pine Press staff, and that they were at least going to be able to experience, because as a journalist, like as a young journalist, being able to go places where big news is actually happening, and especially like national news, is really exciting, and it's something that people are going to learn a lot from. But other than that, we wanted to take two trips down, not just because we wanted to, report what's happening. It's like people know what's happening. But it's like the headline here, it says Flint, what now? Because that's the biggest question that we have to ask. Like, where do we go from here with this?
So I'll come back to you in a minute with more on the this latest issue. But Breanne, did you go down to Flint?
I did. I went down the second time. Again, I wasn't able to go the first time because of work. But I did want to go back the second time. It was really interesting being there while the debates were going on and kind of getting a sense from the local community how that was impacting them. And like Laureen said, Flint, what now? You kind of realize when you're in the environment with the people in the community that maybe a lot of the things that the press are coming out with aren't realistic. They're making it seem like there's a whole lot being done, but a lot of it's stuck in legislature and red tape, and the people aren't really seeing a quick effect of what's going on. So that was definitely interesting.
What all did you do on that second trip?
So we went down, we met up with some of the local people at the Union Auto Workers, and we interviewed one, Chia Morgan. So she's an activist in the community. She had a really good perspective on what was happening and on the ground. And then from there, part of us, including myself, went to the water. We did the water distribution with that group.
Okay.
So like Jakob was saying, we hit a lot of houses, but when you reflect back on it, it's so minimal. You're really helping such a small amount of people in the community that maybe haven't gotten water filters, that haven't seen any of that government money, and a lot of them haven't had any deliveries of water in weeks. So it's kind of harsh. I mean,
Sure.
it's like these are your neighbors and they're suffering, and you're kind of wondering, what would have been different if it had happened in your own town. And just seeing the impact of not being able to have water. I mean, I got home and every time I turned the tap on, every time I took a drink, you're thinking like so much energy and so much money is being pumped in to just focusing on taking care of your family and having clean water. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. What jumps out at you, Jakob, about the final product from this article? What are you most excited about or proud of when you see what the students have put together?
I think it's a real good package in this latest edition of the White Pine, which folks can get at distribution points around town, both on campus and off campus, cafes and whatnot. There's excellent photography. On the cover we have kind of a local alt-weekly paper asking hard questions about the world forgetting about Flint. This paper is kind of has been dropped in a gray late winter snowbank, and it just kind of offers this kind of tough imagery. We have photos inside on the center spread from the water distribution. We have photos of children carrying water. We've got photos of some of the victims. On one page, there's both a really solid news story by Breanne with a timeline of the water crisis, which I would assume that most Michiganders are pretty familiar with the story by now, so I won't go too much into it. There's two columns written by a fellow writer, Kristen Madreen, and also a photographer. One is a real heartfelt kind of first-person column about what it was like to go to the home of it's this Latina family. This home, the Vargas family, 3 generations living in one home. The father, Sergio, immigrated from Mexico, I believe is undocumented. He lived in Texas. His 22-year-old daughter, who was a student at U of M Flint, who was a beauty queen in San Antonio before they came to Michigan, she was really emblematic of the American immigrant success story. And then she had their daughter, Lila, who's now 5 months old. We went to their house and visited them there. They live in some pretty squalid, tough conditions. But the 5-month-old girl, Lila, is definitely lead affected. People have been taking blood samples for their children since the water crisis broke. And her lead count is way, 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 way higher than any federal healthy standards recommend. Her vision has been impaired. I mean, she wasn't following movement, say, a parent's eye until she was 3 months old, which, parents will know is way, way late, sickeningly way late. And what came out of that interview, again, this was reporter Kristen and me and an organizer sitting with this family in their house. The mother, the 22-year-old mother, is telling us how guilty she feels for the fact that her daughter is sick and may be sick her entire life from lead, because she was drinking the tap water in Flint while she was pregnant, trying to stay hydrated, drinking the tap water while breastfeeding, again, trying to stay hydrated because a lactating mother needs to consume lots of water. She had no idea that there was lead in the water. And one of the most important parts of the story, and the reason we sought out a Spanish-speaking Latino immigrant family, was because the news really broke that there was a problem in Flint, and the Governor Snyder admitted there was a huge problem last October, and it became a national story over the fall, and by January it was an international story. No one in local or state or federal government reached out to tell the non-English speaking immigrant community until late January, February there was a problem. So there was no concerted effort to put out information in a language other than English that there was a problem here. It was finally up to community organizers, community activists, people involved with the local Spanish-speaking Catholic churches to do that themselves.
You mentioned that part of the story, and that's the part that just caught my eye. She said she felt guilty; it was her fault. She knew something was I knew something was wrong with the water, because many times when I drank it, I would throw it back up. My body did not like that water. I even talked to my doctor about it. He told me I was dehydrated, that I had to drink more. Mm-hmm. Pretty remarkable.
It's, I've been a journalist for quite a while, and to some degree you become thick-skinned and you build up a wall to tough stories. But there are some stories that just hit you, and this one hit. I mean, this was really hard to witness, to hear. It was very hard for Kristen to write about, she said. It was tough. And, Flint is a lot of things. Flint is now a big, huge political debate. I mean, many calling on Governor Snyder to go. It's obviously been part of the presidential debate because Clinton and Sanders have talked about it so much. But the most important stories are always away from the politics. They are the personal stories like this.
Right, people involved. Laureen, what about you in terms of what jumps out at you from this, this issue of the paper? What stories moved you? As Jakob said, lots of stories over our careers have kind of gotten to us. You guys ladies are both fairly young in your journalism careers too, but there's a lot of emotional stuff on these two trips.
Yeah. Basically, the photos tend to really speak a lot. I mean, you see a lot of, the joy and the camaraderie that's come together from people after they've united over this, but you really capture the emotion. And the thing is, with this edition, we had run one full Flint edition before this. It was all about Flint. And it was just basically giving Northerners a real perspective of what's going on out there. Mm-hmm. Something, because it's we went, down there, and we're able to give a perspective that, other people up here may not have gotten. So with this issue, we wanted to focus on moving forward instead of just saying, okay, this is what's going on. And one of the biggest things for me is that we talked about, we included in these photos Leanne Walters, who is one of the women that first started blowing the whistle on everything that was going on and started really getting herself out there in the community to tell people what was going on with this. But when you see the activists marching and stuff like that, you wouldn't imagine that something this catastrophic is happening in Michigan. So it's kind of hard to put your mind around, and if you're not there, if you're not living in Flint, it's hard to really understand what's happening. So the important thing is getting our readers who live 3, 4, 5 hours away from Flint to care. How
did that change your perspective, Breanne, of what was going on in Flint? Obviously, you heard about it beforehand, but
yeah. Well,
we all follow the news so closely that it's I know what's going on,
right.
But then you actually get there.
With an activist spirit, it made me really angry. I mean, you're going down there, you're a journalist, you're supposed to be fair and balanced, and you just want to get involved and you get angry. That was the main thing for me, just seeing all of these people suffer and questioning why isn't the government more involved. Why are volunteers handing out bottled water that's been donated and no one's going house to house with 5-gallon jugs and testing these people and getting them the medical help they need? It just seems like the response is lacking. It's still lacking, and it's been up to the community, the churches, the private companies, your neighbors to help each other out. And I mean, it's pretty overwhelming to see that. It's pretty amazing. It kind of gives you hope, but then at the same time, you're angry. Why are these people responsible for this? You know, they had nothing to do with it.
What was the decision-making process, Laureen, in terms of, you know, what goes into the paper? What, I don't know if there's anything that didn't make the cut, and secondly, how do you tie that to Northern Michigan? Is there a tie to the college in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I had originally, this issue had a completely different story budget, but then they ended up taking the trip down there and coming back with such good material, and they ended up having enough time to get some stories to me and stuff in time for this article to run. So I moved other things, like I cut other things that were not as, you know,
Time sensitive.
Yeah, and just like relevant and important. So I cut that stuff. We changed what the center spread was going to be. We changed it into this, the people of Flint. And we just felt like it was very necessary from our last issue to give a follow-up. And it's like because they had just went down there, it was better for them to just get them to me for this issue. Otherwise, it wouldn't have come out until like much later. So it was now or never. And I'm glad that we ended up doing it because it turned out very well, I think.
One tie-in, local, at least a rationale for running so much coverage of Flint in a Traverse City paper was this is also to some degree the Michigan political issue. There's a couple stories here in this edition about Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump's visits to our area, kind of contrasting stories in terms of what the experience was like for the journalist at each of those rallies. Distinctly different crowds, distinctly different tones and auras. And of course, this ran because these candidates came to our town, which was a surprise that we got so much political play, and it was right before the Michigan primary. And so this is, you know, to some degree, the Michigan primary edition. And of course, in the case of Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, when they came to Michigan, when they talk about Michigan, it's always usually in the context of Flint. So Flint has become, or did become, in our primary, the political story.
Yeah. What, I guess, what now is the question. So what can you tell us, both of you, with just your perspectives on where we do go from here?
I think the main thing is people supporting a legislation to get through and really get all of that allocated money to the community to have a more, you know, substantial effect on the ground. There are also petitions out there wherever you stand on Snyder. There's petitions out, you know, coming out to either make him resign or a recall on him. And then I also, you know, I wrote the Flint What Now article. A main thing too is if you're looking to donate, don't necessarily just jump on the bottled water bandwagon. I mean, bottled water is great. People need the fresh water, but there's other things that can be done now. And even just financially supporting people on the ground, communities on the ground, organizations that are raising money, that are in the community. You know, don't just go online and find something random. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people are taking advantage of the situation, which is sad, but just do a little research and make sure your money's going to the right people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Laureen, what about you?
I guess I would say that the first thing that needs to happen is that the people who are responsible for, you know, making this happen in the first place, which could have easily been prevented, they need to be held responsible. And whichever, you know, whatever happens with that, it's just people need to realize the fact that, you know, we may live a few hours north of Flint, our water may not be poisoned, but this affects all of us, especially because of the fact that Governor Snyder is not just the governor of Flint, he's the governor of Michigan. Decisions that he makes pertaining to this could affect decisions that he makes pertaining to the whole rest of the state. I mean, this impacts everybody. And this impacts other states that are close to the region and the Great Lakes. And it's just, I don't know. I think that the first thing that needs to be done is that we have to shift gears in power and, you know, put somebody there who knows what they're doing and actually cares about what's happening to the people.
So I was going to say, I was hoping you might tout what's coming up next in the White Pine Press. There's a couple editions left before the semester ends.
Before she does that, let me bounce off of what she just said, because this has become a political hot button issue. People have strong feelings out in the world about whether it had to do with the Flint mayor or the city council or the governor or where the axe needs to fall. How do you teach? How do you talk to the students about that? Not taking sides on that, especially when you go down there and you see that impact firsthand. It's hard not to get emotionally invested in so and so's fault.
The way I teach and the way I kind of try to structure the trips. Breanne had a great story talking about the timeline and the history and the context of how this happened and names of who might have been responsible. But the main lessons I tried to impart really on the trip were, we're going to meet not with politicians or elected leaders. We did happen to run into Congressman Dan Kildee and the state senator from Genesee County at events that day, but we spent most of the time focusing on, again, the people in the community, because I think in terms of the storytelling angle to this, and I believe that good journalism is good storytelling, the real hard-hitting stories are the people in their homes, people in the community. That's a more dynamic story, really, than a governor who faces the crisis of his life, or his staff who have resigned, or EPA officials who have resigned. The story is always the people, not the politician. Yeah.
I do want to end on that last note, though, of what is next, and I don't know how far through the semester you go with the White Pine Press, but what are we doing for the rest of the school year and looking ahead to next year, too, for both of you?
So we actually have 2 issues left for this semester. The next one that comes out on April 7th is our parody issue that we do every year. It's called the White Pine Pickle. So just comedy, parody, it's kind of like The Onion in press. It's pretty entertaining.
It's a nice little break.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
After spring break.
Yep. So, that is a lot of fun to do and to talk about and to plan out and to put together. So I am excited about that. And then after that, we'll have our final issue for the semester, which comes out April 21st. And the way that it's looking, it's kind of going to be a summer package. It's going to include a lot of stuff about Earth Day and environmental efforts and stuff like that, but also about parks in Michigan, summer activities, things to do. It's our issue that kind of sits on the stands for a little bit as the tourists come into town. So we just want to be able to do something that a lot of people can pick up and be like, oh, yeah, this is stuff we can do
throughout
this
the summer.
Yep, exactly.
Sure. So are you done then at NMC after that?
No, actually.
Okay.
I have my associate's degree, but I'm going to stay with White Pine Press because I take my language course at NMC.
Okay.
So that helps me be able to stay, and I'm excited about that.
Excellent. And how about you, Breanne?
How about me? I will be there for a while as a part-time student who also works full-time. I'm going for my associate, so it'll get done when it gets done.
More writing from both of them.
Yeah, no, actually, next fall we're going to have about the entire nucleus of the White Pine Press back, which is fantastic. Whereas this past fall, Laureen was the only returning member, and we had to reinvent the wheel, and it was tough. So I'm really thrilled that the same team is coming back. I think one of the great advantages of the White Pine Press and the student newspaper staff is that most of the students at the college, certainly the ones I deal with, are there part-time or might be there full-time, but they're also working in the community. They're growing as adults and seeing things out in the real world. They're not just having the college experience, which I think informs the stories you tell and the stories you experience.
That's great. Well, I want to thank all of you guys for coming in. White Pine Press. You obviously can read some of these online if you're not close to campus or in as you said, the coffee shops and other establishments that put this out for people to pick up. But it's whitepinepress.com.
.org.
Whitepinepress.org. So appreciate it. Jakob Wheeler, faculty advisor, thanks for coming in. And also Breanne Russell and Laureen Horan. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks,
I'm Bill Froehlich. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next week right here on The Briefing Room.